It was -10 degrees Celsius on Christmas Eve. My dad locked me out in the snow for talking back to him at dinner. I watched them open presents through the window. An hour later, a black limousine pulled up. My billionaire grandmother stepped out. She saw me shivering, looked at the house, and said one word: demolish. I need to know I'm not alone in this. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Let's get through this story together. I didn't even have time to process the word before the doors of the limousine flew open. Two men in tactical black suits moved with the precision of an extraction team. They didn't knock on the front door. They didn't ring the bell. They simply walked onto the frozen lawn, flanked me, and lifted me out of the snowdrift like I was a high-value asset being recovered from a war zone. My limbs were too stiff to protest. The cold had moved past pain into a dangerous, heavy numbness. I was carried 3 steps and deposited into the back of the car. The door thudded shut, sealing out the wind, the ice, and the sight of my stepsister opening the laptop that was supposed to be mine. The silence inside the car was absolute. The air smelled of expensive leather and filtered heat. Across from me sat a woman I hadn't seen in 7 years, Grandmother Josephine. She didn't look like a grandmother. She looked like a CEO about to initiate a hostile takeover. Her silver hair was cut into a sharp bob that looked like it could cut glass, and she was wearing a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my failed startup. She didn't gasp, she didn't cry or ask if I was okay. Emotions were inefficient in a crisis. Instead, she reached to the seat beside her, picked up a heavy wool trench coat, and tossed it over my shivering frame. It landed with a weight that felt like armor. "Put your arms through," she commanded. Her voice was low, steady, and devoid of pity. "Hypothermia is a boring way to die, Arya." I fumbled with the sleeves, my teeth chattering so hard I thought they might crack. I wrapped the wool around me, the warmth stinging my frozen skin as blood started circulating again. I looked out the tinted window. Through the glass, I could see the silhouette of my father, Gregory, standing in the living room window, raising a glass of wine. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. He had no idea the castle was already under siege. I stammered. My voice barely worked. I just told him the turkey was dry. That's all I said. Josephine didn't look at me. She kept her eyes trained on the house, watching her son. "You think this is about a turkey? You think you're sitting here freezing because of a poultry critique?" She turned to me then, her eyes dark and analytical. This is where she dissected the situation, not with sympathy, but with surgical precision. "He didn't lock you out because you were disrespectful, Arya. He locked you out because he felt small. Look at him." She gestured to the window where Gregory was now laughing, performing happiness for his new wife. That is a man with a glass ego. A weak man only feels strong when he is making someone else suffer. He needs a thermometer to measure his power. And tonight, your shivering is his proof of life. It's not punishment, it's fuel. The words hit me harder than the cold. I had spent months thinking I was the problem, that my failure with the business had made me unlovable, that if I just stayed quiet enough, obedient enough, I could earn my place back at the table. But Josephine was rewriting the equation. I wasn't a bad daughter. I was just a battery for a narcissist. "He thinks he's teaching me a lesson," I whispered, the realization settling in like ice water. "He is," Josephine replied, reaching for the intercom button. "Driver, cut the power to the main house." I watched, stunned, as the lights in the mansion flickered and died. The Christmas tree went dark. The silhouette of my father froze. Inside the limo, the only light came from the digital dashboard, casting a blue glow on Josephine's face. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't a game to her. It was a correction. "Warm up," she said, leaning back into the leather seat. "We're not leaving yet. I want him to see the car. I want him to know that the checkmate is already on the board before he even realizes we're playing chess." I sat in the plush leather seat, the warmth of the wool coat finally penetrating the bone-deep chill, and watched the darkened house. It looked different without the lights, more like a tomb. You might wonder why I went back. Why, after my tech startup imploded and left me with nothing but debt and a bruised ego, I chose to return to the one place that had always made me feel small. The answer isn't poetic. It was financial. I bet everything on an algorithm that was 6 months ahead of the market, and I ran out of runway before the world caught up. Bankruptcy wasn't just a legal status. It was a leash that dragged me back to Aspen. For the last 3 months, the price of admission to live under Gregory's roof was my dignity. It wasn't a dramatic, sudden payment. It was a subscription fee I paid in daily installments. Silence when Patricia critiqued my failure to launch. Obedience when Gregory lectured me on real business, while sipping scotch paid for by a trust he didn't earn. Compliance when Reese, my stepsister, treated me like an unpaid intern in my own childhood home. I looked at my hands. They were still red from the cold, but the shaking had stopped.
"I didn't think he'd actually do it," I said quietly. "I thought he was bluffing." Josephine didn't look away from the house. "That is the trap, isn't it? The normalization of cruelty. It doesn't start with locking you out in a blizzard. If he had done that on day one, you would have left. No, it starts with the small things, the jokes at your expense, the way he interrupts you, the way he makes you wait for him. He lowers the temperature 1 degree at a time so you don't notice you're freezing until your heart stops beating." She was right. I had spent months adjusting my thermostat to match their coldness. I had convinced myself that if I just took the insults, if I just smiled through the dinners where they dissected my failures, I would eventually earn my way back into the fold. I thought I was being resilient. I see now that I was just being conditioned. I conditioned myself to accept scraps. I admitted, the shame burning hotter than the heater vents. I thought if I was quiet enough, they'd forgive me for failing. "You didn't fail, Arya," Josephine said, her voice cutting through my self-pity like a scalpel. "You attempted something difficult. They have never attempted anything. They just consume. And parasites always hate the host that tries to break free." She tapped the screen on the center console. A live feed appeared, connected to the security cameras inside the house. The backup generator hadn't kicked in yet. I could see them in the living room, illuminated by the firelight and the glow of their phones. They weren't panicked. They weren't rushing to the window to see if I was freezing to death. They were annoyed. "Look at them," Josephine commanded. I watched inside the house. The mood had shifted from celebration to irritation. Patricia was gesturing wildly, her silhouette sharp and jagged against the firelight. I didn't need audio to know what she was saying. She was complaining about the inconvenience. The power outage was ruining her party aesthetic. Then I saw Reese. She was sitting on the sofa, holding a silver-wrapped box. My box, the one I had wrapped for myself, containing the last piece of technology I owned, a high-performance laptop I had salvaged from my company's liquidation. I had brought it to the living room intending to work after dinner, restore the paper. She opened the lid. Even in the grainy night vision of the security feed, I could see her smile. She said something to Gregory, laughing. He nodded, pouring another drink in the dark. He wasn't worried about his daughter in the snow. He was letting his stepdaughter loot her corpse. "She's taking my laptop," I said, my voice flat. "That has my code on it, my intellectual property." "She's taking it because she believes you don't exist anymore. In their minds, you are already gone, deleted. Patricia is probably telling her right now that you're having a tantrum somewhere, that you ran off to teach them a lesson. She is gaslighting that girl into believing your suffering is a performance." I watched Gregory raise his glass again. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who believed he owned the world and everyone in it. "He thinks the darkness is just a power outage. He thinks he is the only one who can turn the lights off, Josephine corrected. He is about to learn that he doesn't even own the switch. She picked up a sleek black phone from the console. She didn't dial, she just spoke a single command into it. Execute Phase 2. Enter the premises. The car doors locked with a heavy mechanical thud. Outside, the 2 security agents who had retrieved me started walking toward the front door. They didn't look like guests. They moved like a foreclosure. "Ready?" Josephine asked, finally looking at me. Her eyes were hard, but there was something else there too, an invitation. "I don't have anything," I said, looking down at my borrowed coat. "I don't have my keys. I don't have my money. They have everything." Josephine smiled, a terrifying, razor-thin expression. "You have the deed, Arya. You just don't know it yet. Let's go introduce your father to his landlord." The front door didn't open. It yielded. My grandmother didn't knock. She simply walked through the entrance of the estate as if the locks recognized their true master and dissolved. The blizzard rushed in behind her, a vortex of snow and wind that swirled across the marble foyer, killing the warmth of the fireplace in seconds. I followed 2 steps behind, flanked by the security team. I felt like a ghost returning to haunt the living. My coat was heavy. My body was still towing, but my mind was razor sharp. I watched the scene unfold like a slow-motion car crash. The living room was a tableau of interrupted greed. The backup generator had finally kicked in, bathing the room in a harsh emergency yellow light. Gregory was mid-laugh, a crystal tumbler of scotch raised in a toast. Patricia was admiring a diamond bracelet on her wrist. Reese was typing on my laptop. They froze. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. It was the sound of oxygen being sucked out of a room before an explosion. "Mother." Gregory's voice cracked. He lowered his glass, the liquid sloshing over the rim onto the Persian rug. He blinked, trying to reassemble his reality. We didn't expect you. The roads are closed." Josephine didn't look at him. She walked into the center of the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a gavel striking a bench. She didn't remove her coat. She didn't smile. She looked at the holiday decorations, the pile of gifts, the food on the table with the clinical detachment of a health inspector shutting down a contaminated restaurant. "Turn off the music," she said. It wasn't a request. Reese scrambled for the remote, her eyes wide. The Christmas jazz died instantly. Gregory stepped forward, putting on the mask he wore for investors and creditors, the charming, misunderstood patriarch. "Josephine, really, you gave us a start. We were just having a quiet family evening. Patricia, get my mother a drink. She must be freezing." "I am not cold, Gregory," Josephine said, her voice cutting through his performance. "But Arya was." She stepped aside, revealing me standing in the hallway. I saw the color drain from Patricia's face. Reese pulled my laptop onto her lap, trying to hide it with a throw pillow. Gregory didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed, like a magician whose trick had been revealed by a heckler. "Arya." He sighed, shaking his head with mock disappointment. "I see you went running to your grandmother. Always the victim, aren't you? I told you, Mother, she was having a tantrum. She stormed out because I offered her some constructive criticism on her business. I was just about to go look for her." "You were pouring a scotch," I said. My voice was raspy from the cold, but steady.
"And you locked the deadbolt." "Details." Gregory waved a hand dismissively. "It's a drafty house. We were protecting the pipes." Josephine turned to the man standing beside her. I hadn't noticed him in the limo, but he had entered with the silence of a shadow. He was wearing a suit that cost more than a mid-sized sedan and holding a leather briefcase. Mr. Vance, the family's shark. "Is the timeline established?" Josephine asked him. "Yes, madam," Vance replied.
We had the security logs from the gate, the thermal imaging from the car, and the timestamp of the lockout. 45 minutes of exposure at least. In most jurisdictions, that is attempted manslaughter. In this family, we call it a breach of contract. Gregory laughed. It was a nervous, brittle sound. Contract? What are you talking about? This is my house. I discipline my daughter how I see fit. That, Josephine said, is where you are mistaken. She gestured to Vance. He placed the briefcase on the coffee table, right on top of a plate of untouched appetizers. The sound of the latches snapping open echoed in the room like gunshots. You don't own this house, Gregory, Josephine said softly. You never did. Gregory's arrogance faltered. I have the deed. You signed it over to me 10 years ago. It's in the safe. You have a piece of paper, Josephine corrected. You have a forgery that I allowed you to keep because it kept you quiet and out of my portfolio, but the ink on the real document dried 26 years ago. She pulled a single thick document from the briefcase and dropped it onto the table. It didn't look like a Christmas card. It looked like an eviction notice. Read the beneficiary line, Gregory. He picked it up. His hands were shaking now. I watched his eyes scan the legal text. I watched the exact moment his world ended. This says, he stammered. It says, the estate, the land, and the entire Harrison Holding Company were placed in a blind trust to be transferred to the first female heir upon her 26th birthday. She turned to me. Happy birthday, Aria. The room spun. I looked at my father. He wasn't looking at the document anymore. He was looking at me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see the tyrant who controlled my allowance, my career choices, and my self-worth. I saw a squatter. You, Gregory whispered, the venom returning to his voice. You knew. You planned this. I knew nothing, I said, the realization washing over me like a warm tide. I thought I was broke. I thought I was homeless. You are, Patricia spat, standing up. This is ridiculous, Josephine. You can't just give everything to her. She's a failure. She crashed her own company. She can't run an estate. She didn't crash her company, Josephine said coldly. She was sabotaged. We tracked the short selling on her stock. Patricia, we know Gregory used his leverage to spook her investors so she would come crawling back home. He needed her here. He needed her under his thumb because he knew this day was coming. Josephine stepped closer to her son. You broke her leg so you could offer her a crutch, and then you kicked the crutch away in a blizzard. I raced her, Gregory shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I put the food on this table. This is my home. This is not your home, Mr. Vance interjected, his voice bored and lethal. Technically, as of midnight, you are trespassing. Trespassing? Gregory's face turned purple. I am her father. Biologically, yes, I said, stepping into the room. I walked over to Reese, who shrank back into the sofa cushions. I reached down and pulled my laptop from her hands. She didn't resist. But legally, you're just the liability I inherited. I looked at the document on the table. My name was there, printed in black ink. It wasn't just a house. It was freedom. It was the capital I needed to restart my life. It was the weapon I needed to end his. What do you want to do, Miss Harrison? Vance asked me. He wasn't asking Josephine. He was asking me. The transfer of power was absolute. I looked at Gregory. He was panting, sweating, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an angle, a lie, a way out. He looked at me and I saw him preparing to beg. He was going to play the family card. He was going to talk about blood and loyalty and all the things he had frozen out of me an hour ago. I want him out, I said. Now? Vance asked. The blizzard is getting worse, Patricia cried. You can't throw us out in this. I looked at the window where I had stood, shivering. I looked at the heavy coat Josephine had draped over my shoulders. I don't want them out tomorrow, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that filled the room. I want them out now, and I want everything they own left behind. They leave with what they're wearing. Nothing else. Josephine smiled. It was the proudest I had ever seen her. You heard the owner, she said to the security team. Clear the building. Wait! Gregory lunged towards me. Arya, listen, we are family. You can't do this. I was just trying to mold you. I was trying to make you tough. You succeeded. The security guards moved in. It wasn't a polite escort. It was a removal. They grabbed Gregory by his tuxedo jacket. He screamed, kicking at the furniture as they dragged him towards the door. Patricia was shrieking, clutching her pearls. Reese followed them, looking at me with a mixture of terror and awe. The front door opened again. The wind howled, hungry and waiting. I watched my father being shoved out into the snow. He stumbled, falling onto his knees in the drift where I had been standing. He looked back at the house, at the warmth, at the light. He screamed, Arya! Open the door! I walked to the window. I placed my hand against the cold glass. I looked him in the eye, and then I reached for the curtain cord. I whispered, demolish. I pulled the cord. The heavy velvet drapes slid shut, blotting out the sight of him, sealing the warmth inside and leaving him in the cold he had built for me. The room fell silent again. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the scratching of a pen as Mr. Vance prepared the final documents. Well, Josephine said, walking over to the bar and pouring herself a drink. She handed me the glass. Welcome home, Arya. If you've ever had to freeze to find your fire, subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to know you are not the black sheep. You are the survivor who hasn't been paid yet.